All right, it's getting set up. I'll let you know when we're live. All right, we should be live now.
All right, thank you. Clark, anytime.
All right. My name is Clark Roush, and on behalf of the Nebraska Arts Council, I'd like to welcome you to this panel meeting. We have convened to review applications in the Arts Learning Project grant category. Decisions made by this panel will determine the funding for all applications. They will be reviewed by the Nebraska Arts Council at the next meeting to convene on December 13th. I'd like for each panelist to introduce themselves to one another and to anyone listening in. Amy?
Thank you, Clark. My name is Amy Haddad, and I am a retired professor from Creighton University, where I taught for many years in ethics. I'm a poet as well, and I'm on the Arts Council board, if I didn't say that already. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry?
Hi, I'm Sherry Hofshire, and I'm chair of the Arts Council Board of Directors, and I'm a retired professor from UNO in art history and arts education.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Smith. I am the Youth Studios Manager at the Union for Contemporary Arts. I have a degree in nonprofit management and art studies at the University of Nebraska. And I have just been involved with working with youth for the 20 plus years.
All right, thank you. In addition to Suzanne Wise and panelists, Nebraska Arts Council staff members present today include Mike Markey, who's our Deputy Director, Ann Alston, Program Specialist, Jennifer Drybelbus, Grants Administrator, Joshua Brown, Program Coordinator, and Sam Hennig, Communications Manager. At this time, I will turn the welcome over to our Director, Suzanne Weiss.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that are listening online, welcome. And we hope that this will be an informative session for you. And I always want to remind people that these dollars are your tax dollars. So it's really important to always say thanks to the Nebraska Arts Council when you're talking to an elected official, that we are a state agency, and always remember to invite them to your events and to advocate for public funding for the arts with any candidates, which I think is apropos, seeing how we just finished up with an election cycle. So with that, I wish you all good luck, and I'll turn it back over to Clark.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right, Mike, would you please begin by discussing today's panel process?
Sure. Thank you, Clark. Welcome, everybody. And I'll just mention that we don't anticipate it, but just in case we do go over an hour or so, we may take a break. And if we do, we'll stop the live stream and let you all know when we're coming back. And just a reminder to the panelists that even though you can't see the folks out there on the live stream, they can see you. So remember to mute yourselves when you're not talking, and we'll let you know if we're going to take a break. Now, for the panel process, panelists have received and have all read every application in advance. Each application has been assigned a primary and a secondary reviewer. Applications will be discussed and then individually scored by each panelist according to the published NAC criteria for this category. Panelist scores will then be averaged, and the applications will be ranked according to that average score from highest to lowest. Panelists will then determine which of the applications merit funding based upon those scores. A mathematical formula will later be applied to determine grant award amounts for the approved applications. Award calculations will be based on the average score for each application and the available funds for this category. Higher ranking applications will receive a greater percentage of their request. Finally, NAC staff members, in this case, Ann Alston, are here to assist with the panel process, remaining neutral as to not influence the panel process. As such, Ann will not engage in the panel discussions except to add clarification about the grants or procedures when appropriate. A final note, the applications will be discussed in their alphabetical order, and a copy of the order of applications is available on the NAC website. That's it, Clark. Good luck, everybody. Uh-oh, you're mute yourself, Clark.
You.
There we go.
Questions among our panelists. And we'll provide a brief synopsis of each application, and then I'll call upon each panelist one by one for your comments, and I'll start with the primary reviewer for each grant. We'll now proceed with the first application.
So the first application comes from an organization by the name of Consuming Fire School of Dance and Fitness Center from Chadron, Nebraska. The name of their project is Developing Diverse Dancers. And as a reminder, this grant is intended to help pay teaching artists who will be leading classes in Appalachian clogging and lyrical dance, including the required shoes, from February through May. And an introduction to clogging will be offered to ages 6 through 10, and lyrical dance will be offered for ages 11 through 15.
You're muted, Clark.
Oh, you're still muted, Clark.
All right, Sherry, would you please give your input on this grant application?
Certainly. First of all, I'd like to thank Ann for giving me one that was with dance, since I have a particular affinity for dance. This particular grant, which takes place in Chadron, is Developing Diverse Dance, is quite a good idea of what they're trying to do, with the idea of expanding the borders and the interest of their students in another form of dance. It would have been helpful to have a background of what forms of dance they are familiar with, but they are going to be doing Appalachian clogging and lyrical dance. One thing that I would, and this goes both between, overlaps from artistic quality and into goals, is I'd like to see some connection to, and maybe they're doing this, but they didn't state that they will be discussing an explanation of what Appalachian clogging is. I think most of us relate clogging to Dutch clogging, which it does relate to. And I think expanding the borders of understanding that this kind of step dancing goes over other cultures as well. You can connect it to Indigenous Native American step dancing. You can connect it to Irish step dancing. It's a form. And also, you know, is there an understanding of where Appalachia is, or what Appalachian clogging actually means? Since this is an arts learning grant, it needs to go beyond just using the art form and learning the art form, the mechanics of it, into a little bit broader understanding. They do state that they teach coordination, commitment, discipline, focus, and teamwork. And those are all good qualities. I know that we do not require the when they're not school connected to use these standards, but it might be helpful for those who, if you have not, are not familiar with the state standards for dance, to look at what they are, at least to see some of the kinds of things, because these standards have been developed by dance professionals, and some of the kinds of qualities or skills that they put in that can be considered part of the standards to be assessed. It might be another way to enrich what you're looking at in terms of your goals and evaluation and all. In the planning, it would be helpful also in the timeline to know a few other pieces that are mentioned throughout the grant should be also identified in that timeline. And it says we talk about costumes, but there's no indication of, do we pay someone to do those costumes? Are they made, are they just street clothes put together? What exactly is that? I would also say that in the evaluation, it might be helpful to, it is stated that they are assessed by how well they learn the dance and perform it at the performance. There could also be a reflective piece by the dancers. If indeed you are trying to introduce them to a new form of dance that is beyond their cultural understanding and new skills. What did they find the most challenging? What did they find the most interesting? What were some of get a reflection back from the students to help you in the process of teaching this sometime in the future. And then in the lyrical dance, there are several things mentioned where they learn musical phrasing, expression in music, and projecting that into movement and dance, and how their bodies are music. And then at the end, it's dropped in that they also will measure their flexibility by their ability to do the splits. That hadn't been, nothing was mentioned above that you were getting that specific. It was just performance. So there needs to be consistent. I would say as an overall too, that possibly, and I know that there's, a very, very limited number of people working on all this, but possibly a community person that could look at this grant. There were several inconsistencies in grammar and various things that could be, would make it a little bit tighter. I really thought that the being able to serve the students that work at the Post Playhouse during the summertime, and you're giving them dance and movement classes during the year to improve their performances is really terrific. All of your outreach with your underserved population. Thank you for putting in your demographics about the FAR. Those were good information to have. But the way you have build your own scholarship, the way you have, at first I looked at the budget and saw that you were only asking for 10 pairs of shoes, but you have 25 students. So, and well, wait a minute, we've got an inconsistency, but you explained that very well by then saying that you have this shoe rental and this turn back in and get credit for at the end of the time that the students after a couple of years. And those are excellent programs to really help encourage and increase the underserved population that you are taking care of. And with that, I think we'll turn it over.
All right, thank you, Sherry. Amy, please.
Thank you. I'm going to mention things that Sherry may not have mentioned or just touched upon. I thought that the teachers that I have involved with this seem to be very qualified to teach these courses to the age groups that are targets for this. I think adding these two dimensions, I'm assuming, and maybe I read it, but I'm assuming that they mostly teach ballet and tap. And so including these two things would be other opportunities, would add variety, and also might encourage people who don't want to do ballet and tap to have another option. So I thought that was a good thing to branch out like that. most of my comments were in the planning and evaluation stage. There was a lot of mixing of goals and evaluation outcomes, a lot that didn't align, and those things should, in my view. The technical aspects, as Sherry mentioned, like doing the splits, that's very specific. But then there were other types of goals that would make a lot of sense from learning a new type of dance, like confidence, working with others in the studio, preparing for the performance, following through with assignments, fairly concrete things that could be measured either by student reflection, pre and post, or other measures that they could come up with. I really didn't see that in this, and I think it would help a lot if they could sort through what are goals and then how are we going to measure them. It seems like Donna Gimason carries most, if not all, the weight in this project. And so I admire single-handed work, but I think that all of the responsibilities being held by one person is something to consider going forward with this program. So perhaps adding assistance or some other plans to take a look at that. I thought the timeline was clear and the assignments made sense, except for the fact that they're assigned mostly to one person. I thought the budget was appropriate. I really applaud the efforts about the shoes and costumes. I mean, I think that's one of the things about dance and recitals and all of that are really an extra expense for families. And so I'm pleased that they're looking at ways to help with that. They mentioned something called the Diverse Dance Program, but I didn't see any further information about that. So I don't know if that applies at all to this grant, but I would like to know more about it if it does. The demographics were very helpful, and I really appreciate that in Greater Nebraska that you don't just worry about the county that you're in, but the counties that surround you. And so that information was very helpful to see how they can serve those. I like that they involved inviting residents from skilled nursing facilities, so we go across the age spectrum. The second letter of support in this, if they want a place to look at, offered many examples of what the students learned beyond the specific dance steps. So they could really look to the letter of support for some really good ideas about goals and then how they might measure them. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Amy. Jacqueline?
Yeah, so I think I do really appreciate like the exploring dance. With the project name, it was a little confusing for me because it says like developing diverse dancers, and just like with thinking about like what diverse like means, and then reading into the application and like realizing that when we're saying diverse, we're talking about like the diversity in the types of dance versus the diversity in the dancers themselves. But I'm also curious as far as with like the demographics like listed, and just like being aware that indigenous populations are part of that demographic. Like how is there any intention with trying to like also be inclusive of a more diverse like demographic in the classes? The other part of that too is just also curious about like the selection of the types of dance to be considered like diverse dance. And I know that one thing that was mentioned was just like how with the clogging that can branch out to other aspects of diverse dance. So I think it has some really good potential stepping stones to see how this program could potentially grow. I really appreciated the letters of support. I do feel like with that, it did kind of bring a little bit more clarity and the work that you do and what was offered. I think that's for the most part the comments that I have.
All right, thank you very much. Anne, would you please give us an overview of the Lincoln Arts Council grant proposal?
You bet. Okay, so the next You know what, let me just break in here. If any of the panelists following discussion wish to modify their scores in the online grant system, you can do so at this time. So, but assuming you're ready to go, we'll go to the next grant. The Lincoln Arts Council has a proposal. The name of the project is the LPS World Music Concert Tour. LPS stands for Lincoln Public Schools. With this grant, musician and teaching artist Daniel Martinez will present 3 LPS curriculum-standards-based workshops to 5th graders at 10 LPS schools. They include 8 elementary and 2 middle schools between January and May of 2023. The funds will be used to pay the teaching artists and musicians involved in the project.
Thank you. All right, Jacqueline, please.
First of all, I always love a project that introduces artists like these that have definitely have had experience, with especially like local like experience, and just to be able to kind of like teach something that normally would not be like taught in the schools. So I do appreciate the scope of the project. It looks like there's a couple of things that I think kind of confused me a little bit about the project. I know that there was a mention that like he's like worked in schools before. I'm curious to see how, if this project was the same, like what some of those like responses like were to the project, or if it's a different approach to the overall project. Also, when it was talking about the budget, just having a little bit more clarity. I know that the budget's supposed to primarily cover the cost of the teaching artist and the band that's involved with it. But I was curious about like the breakdown of if it's just a flat fee, but then there was some inconsistency with that rate to like the total underneath the teaching artist. So just some clarity as far as like, you know, per session, that sort of thing. It does say specifically to 5th graders that's like the demographic that it's like primarily reaching, but also to like when it was talking about like engagement outreach, it mentioned reaching like high school students, specifically like LGBTQ. That seemed a little bit off considering like who their target audience is, in like with like even like the school-wide things. It doesn't seem like that would be part of it, but also just to consider that when we are like thinking about like LGBTQ in like this context, that it shouldn't necessarily just be like in talking about it in like high school. We have people that identify at all ages, but also family members too. So just to keep in mindful when we're thinking about demographics in that way. And like how we're trying to like reach different audiences. Let's see. I think that it did say like a couple of different ways as far as like the evaluation process, that there would be some like written reflections, that kind of stuff. If that's something that has happened before, like just sharing out what we like, what has been learned from that would be helpful. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to share.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'll move to Sherry's reflections.
Okay, I thought that it was a good project description, and I applaud the use of Daniel Martinez. Since I've seen him personally in action, he really does relate well to young people. In the project description, they did talk about introducing different music styles, instruments, traditions, cultures, so that it does go to a global aspect, which is commendable. and that the students are building their own instruments out of recycled items, which is also commendable. And they're learning rhythms and repetition, which then so the arts and educational merit was strong because they're covering geography, science, a number of different things, as well as integration into the arts. And under the goals, which were good, they included the national education, national standards for music and for social studies. And they could have also put in a couple of science ones for as much as they're covering. The evaluation, they made it clear that the students are being evaluated not just based on their skills performance, but their skills learning and their understanding, since they have both performance, they have to make the instruments before they learn to use them, but they're learning about other music. And they have reflection and insight from the students on this learning. And I thought that was very good. This program goes over 4 years, so it'll expand to all schools, which is also commendable. And they made it clear who the underscored were in terms of their demographics and all. I questioned the letters, which I seem to read that they were about art making as opposed to music making with Daniel. And it might be that they didn't have letters specifically about Daniel because the program just started. But I think that they could have did stronger on what they did for the letters. Okay.
Thank you very much. Amy, your reflections, please.
So certainly very enthusiastic guest artist, and the students seemed to really engage with him, and his resume was very helpful in understanding who he is as a musician and performer, but then also, you know, the videos helped to see what he does as a teacher. I too liked the idea of them making their own instruments and then testing them out in workshop. The learning goals are appropriate for music education in general, but then I had questions about for this age group, for fifth graders, because it looked like they were just national music standards. I didn't think some of those standards were appropriate necessarily for fifth graders. So certainly it's appropriate to use standards that are there, but then to make sure, if you're especially going to do a project that extends, beginning with this and extends over 4 years to the other Lincoln Public Schools in the fifth grade, that you really fine tune those evaluation tools. There were a lot of, or at least several goals that started with learn. I don't know how you measure that. You know, it has to be what you see in behavior, performance, something that we can tell some kind of change has occurred. If they have that list of reflection questions that they've been using, it would be helpful to put them in there and maybe give us an idea of what the students' experiences and reflections are. I noticed those letters too, and I think I read them from another grant last time. They just reminded me of another project. So it might be something else from the schools that they were doing with, like was mentioned, maybe an art project instead. So, and that was it.
All right, thank you very much. Anne, if you would give us an overview of the Theater Arts for Kids grant application.
Sure. And I'll remind everyone, if based on the discussion, you want to amend your scores, this would be the time to do it, or leave them as they were. But we like to give our panelists a chance to do that. And so the final grant application that we're looking at today comes from an organization in Lincoln called Theater Arts for Kids. The project title is Theater Arts for Kids Wish Fish Tour. From January through June, the Theater Arts for Kids will be taking their show on the road and will be hosting after-school programs in local elementary schools, community centers, and public parks. The Wish Fish program is a vital part of this project because it allows children with disabilities and challenges to participate in all the general programming. The organization will use NAC funds to pay for instructors and educators who are involved and source extra training necessary for specific challenges, etc. That's it.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with Amy.
So the Wish Fish Tour program is embedded in the Theater Arts for Kids program. And I just found that unique in what I know of these different projects. So the focus in that Wish Fish part is on, and that's where the goals are here. So that's why I'm mentioning this specifically, to teach the Wish Fish mentors skills in supporting their mentees. So there's a whole education piece that's part of this that might seem like it's not connected specifically to the art of theater performance, but because of including that in this whole theater project, the students have other skills and abilities, the ones who are the mentors, that they measure as part of their outcomes for the project. They also mentioned that they have a new partnership with local Kiwanis chapter to support the Wish Fish program. And I think it's a good example of, moving out into the community to find ways to help support this year after year with partnerships like that. They're going to take their program on the road. And when they do that, they have to consider all of the things that need to go into that, like being able to have stages accessible for performers in different venues and things like that, which they include in the grant. I think the artists and educators are well prepared to teach in this. Many of the faculty have international experiences in their areas of expertise. I think the goals and evaluation were clearly spelled out. The program builds on findings from previous years, and I do see that they are using those to fine-tune expectations and outcomes. I am impressed with the special training session in June to prepare students to be Wish Fish mentors. And they're doing this while they're also learning about backstage theater crafts, because certainly not everybody's going to be in the front of the house. And I like the idea that they're including that backstage opportunity for students. I thought the budget was clear and reasonable for this large of a project. I thought the impact of the programs on the community could be clearer. What they added here were a lot of examples of their involvement in a variety of community service and fundraising that really didn't connect back directly, at least for me, to the theater arts and the Wish Fish program. They are involved with a lot of things, volunteering to do a lot of things, but how does this then impact the Wish Fish program and the theater arts program? The last two paragraphs, though, in this section did go back and connect to performances in the community. And this part of the proposal provided excellent information about their connections to a variety of community organizations that then lead them to other communities that might benefit from seeing a performance, or to families or other organizations that include children who might, with special needs, who might then be part of the Wish Fish program. And that performances offer attendees to contribute to the larger community through donation of food or books. And the fact that they serve special needs children and their families is certainly an underserved population, especially in regard to performance art. And the letters from mentors and one parent I thought were very strong. That's it.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. Jacqueline, please.
Thank you. So I think for me, I overall I think this is a really great program, and the parts I guess like for me that I was like struggling a little bit more with as far as the application process goes was the what am I thinking of? I'm sorry. The I guess the project goals. And yeah, specifically like the project goals with I was like I guess I was like struggling with like how like those goals like align with like the like what those like learning objectives like are because it like it's kind of speaks more to like encouragement and like the ability to like attend like a performance and that kind of stuff, and I'm just kind of curious what like the like actual like learning outcomes would be from the project itself. And it might have been kind of more clearly stated elsewhere, but that was one thing that I struggled with a little bit. So just kind of needing a little bit more clarity with that. I understand that this is like the first time for this project, but it's considering that they do have some other things, like as far as like their evaluation, it says that they're utilizing like surveys. It would have been, it was nice to see as far as the testimonials in the letter of support from like the mentors. But it would be nice to kind of just like see a little bit more information, like what specific like questions or feedback that they're receiving for the project, and then like how they use that information to improve like programming in the future. So I do think that like the budget makes sense. I think the planning process makes sense. I also was a little bit like confused as far as like with the programming impact with like the list of all the like the different like ways, but I was like kind of curious specifically what that program impact with the Wish Fish would actually look like. It's clear that they're very like involved within the community and trying to identify different ways for not only like them to be involved in the community, but to encourage like other community members to be more active in the community. So I do appreciate that. Again, I'm just curious like how like that like directly relates to like this project. Obviously they have a long list of partnerships, which is great. And the letter of support were really strong, and I appreciated those as well. I think that's everything.
All right, thank you very much. Sherry, please share your reflections.
Okay, I'll just fill in a little bit that hasn't been said. I think that both the project description, goals, and evaluation pretty well mesh up. I would still go back to the fact that this is an arts learning grant, and all of the social skills and all that are really important, particularly for this this group of young people. But I'd also like to see a little bit more of the theater skills that are that are connected to play, acting and techniques or music or whatever else is involved that goes into the arts theater education aspect of it. Both of their links were to different parts of the same website, which was fine. I think particularly with this, this would have been a really good place to have a video or a composite of photos to reinforce some of these, the impact of this kind of integrated learning. Let's see, I was confused for a while as to Eastman Cloak Form. If with the slash, I thought that was the name of one elementary school. Then it was obviously, became clear it was two. It's just little things that sometimes we get hung up on. The mentor, the letters from the mentors were very strong. That was a smart thing to do. I just had a question on I saw that there on the budget that there's a space facilities after school program line item. And I was just curious as to if they're doing after school programs, if that means that the school is charging them to be there after school. That's not something I'm familiar with. Most times schools let nonprofits have space. So I just wondered, that would have been nice to have a clarification. The only other thing I would just bring up, and it has nothing to do with the grant and nothing to do with the scoring of it, but I do question, because I'm not familiar with this in nonprofits, and that is that the director of the organization is also the president of the board. And in most nonprofits, the director of an organization is an ex officio on the board of directors. And again, that's just a question. And things rotate differently in different aspects, but it'd be something that I think the board should think about. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Well, panelists, quickly rescore if you feel the need to do that. And then now that all applications have been discussed and scored, we'll take a 5-minute break. During this time, the Nebraska Arts Council staff will tally the scores and prepare information for final discussion. When panelists reconvene, we'll review the procedures and make final determinations. The final portion of the meeting is closed to the public, and at this time, we'd like to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us. To the applicants and members of the public who have joined in. Grant applicants will be notified by early June about the funding decision for your project.